all because of a headscarf. I understand the meaning behind it, but like that's just guys.
The Hagia Sophia is a museum in Istanbul, though it has not always been. Built during the late Roman Empire of the East, it would be a cathedral to Orthodox and Greek Christians for centuries as the largest Christian house of worship in the world. After the Ottoman conquest, minarets were added and it became a mosque. To the Ottomans, it became a symbol of their conquest of Rome. Its beauty is renowned around the world. And on a side note, my personal favorite part of it is neither Islamic nor Christian. It's this piece of vandalism, a line of Germanic text carved into one of the balconies about 1,500 years ago, which roughly translates to Haakon was here. The Byzantines bought slaves from Swedish Vikings as well as hired them as mercenaries, and one of these pagan Norsemen, called Haakon, seemed to have felt the need to leave his mark on history. When Ataturk founded his republic, he kicked the imams out of the Hagia Sophia. It was to neither be a mosque nor a church. For centuries it had been the symbol of an Islamic empire, an empire that he had abolished, so he declared it a museum to the past. And as such, it spent its time throughout the Republic. But during the 1980s, some guests started to appear. Necmettin Erbakan, the leader of the Islamist Salvation Party, increasingly started showing up in front of it, protesting that the Hagia Sophia must become a mosque again. Throughout the 1980s, he would rally there, railing against the decadence of the country's business and political elites, rambling about how degenerate women who refuse to wear the veil are, demanding the death penalty for homosexuals, railing against Christians, railing against Jews, demanding the return of Sharia, the return of the Caliphate, proclaiming that only through a return to Islam in state matters and policy and law can society be made virtuous and good again.
So okay, video has already started. I got some stuff to say already. Okay, let's talk about this real quick. Women and revealing clothing. I have two opinions on this, right? Should women be able to wear whatever the hell they want? Yes and no. Yes, in it that they are entitled to wear whatever they want. I know in it that it can be a bit too far. Guys, some of the stuff that these girls does wear, it's just like gym shorts, right? Bro, some of these girls be wearing gym shorts and you can literally basically just see their whole crotch. And a lot of them just purposely do that, which is hilarious because men believe that women do this stuff for male attention. But not really. Not really, actually. Nope. They do it to peacock at other women. Whenever women say, like, we don't do it for the guys, that's actually true. That's actually true. Trust me, take it from someone who's dealt with enough women in his life. That is true. Guys are more like side quests. Like, you know, okay, my main goal is just to peacock at other women, but okay, this guy is clearly flaunting me, so you know, I okay, whatever. I get a bit of validation from that, but the main goal is just to really peacock other women, right? Like, haha, my body is better than yours. Literally, I'm not even kidding. Women do this a lot. I think it's stupid. This is like one of the main reasons, probably like top one reasons why I'm probably single right now, is because you just slowly realize like a lot of these women don't even care about relationships. They kind of just care about freaking flexing and peacocking at other women. It's like, bruh, okay. But like, yeah, going back to the whole gym shorts thing, it's like, dude, really? You don't need this shit to work out. You don't need this to work out, right? We talked about the crowd France reaction where France banned bikinis. Why? And I explained in that video that bikinis literally were just invented to over sexualize women. That's literally why bikinis were there. I literally said, go in the past, go watch some videos in the past, like videos in like, oh god, my throat, in the 50s, in the 60s, you know, before like this modern era that we have today. Yeah, but you don't only see women in bikinis. You just see them in like regular ass swimsuits, bruh. Men's swimsuits have not changed. Men's swimsuits are the same, and women had their own swimsuits just like men. Funny enough. You know, so, and then bikinis went because, again, there's been this hypersexualization of women in the past couple of decades that has just gone way too far at this point. So this is where the no comes from. No in it that really and truly, like you women really and truly shouldn't be like sexualizing yourself. Like, bruh, come on now. Like, do you really want to stoop down to that level? Like, before you go in my comments and just sit down and think, do I really want to stoop down to that level where I'm basically objectifying myself? Because that's basically what it is. Like, you want to be on the same level as the object? Like, no. This is why I say, like, women shouldn't just wear any and everything, because, you know, it gets to a point where it's just kind of just like disrespectful, really and truly. But at the same time, it's like women should be able to wear what they please, in it that they shouldn't be freaking in all black. You know, like freaking all black, freaking like what some of these Muslim countries, I don't know what it's called, but like they were just covered in like freaking all black, and what I'm like, bro, what the heck? That's like, yeah, no. Like, women should just dress normally. No over sexualization of themselves, no objectifying themselves, and no freaking over covering yourself in like all black cloaks and like, no, that's also too far. So yeah, that's my take on that. Really and truly, freaking, I'm telling you guys, bro. I'm telling you guys, a lot of it is just a freaking peacock at other women. Like, bruh, that's so mind blowing to me. Like, men will say like, oh, ha 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 ha, you're sexualizing yourself for other men to see you, blah blah blah, and it's like, no, bruh. And that's another reason why I'm so against it as well, because it's like, there is no good reason for you to be wearing shit like that. Really? You're wearing shit like that just so you can show off at other women, which will do nothing but just cause like body dysmorphia, you know, self-esteem issues, which is already bad among so many freaking women. Oh my god. Like, really? You want to be the reason why someone freaking unalives themselves? Because a lot of women just do that, unfortunately, because freaking their lack of confidence in themselves and in their bodies. But like, you want to be the reason why some girl has such a horrible self-esteem. And you might think to yourself, if you're a guy hearing this, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. And to be honest with you, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. However, like I said, I have dealt with enough women, and oh my god, like, dealing with a girl who has such a low self-esteem because of something like what I just talked about or whatever, even when she shouldn't have a low self-esteem. Because that's a funny thing, you know, a lot of these women have such low self-esteems, and it's like, you are fine the way how you are, but no, because they see all these other women peacocking, they hate themselves. Trust me, that's not pretty to deal with. That's not pretty at all to deal with. Oh my god. I mean, just thinking about that and talking about it is like pissing me off because of the memories that I freaking had to deal with because I unfortunately ran into those type of women.
And for most of that time, he was laughed at, seen as a clown, a relic from the past, as something that was slightly amusing. People, however, simply didn't notice how the crowds attending his rallies kept getting bigger and bigger as time went by. The 1980s had been the decade of the yuppies, new, rich, young businessmen who may have publicly extolled conservative virtues while not necessarily living up to those virtues themselves. With the growth of capital and wealth inequality also came to rise. The gap between the haves and have-nots kept growing, and more people eyed these developments with resentment. The left, who had usually called out such social inequalities, had been beaten into silence by the army. So it was the Islamists, in particular the Islamist right, who jumped on it as an opportunity, and then came the 90s. Throughout the 1980s, the abolished restrictions on financial markets and the opening to global markets, while the government still had a large budget deficit and high interest rates, led to a tsunami of money flooding the banking system. With that tsunami, the value of the Turkish lira rose dramatically despite interventions in the foreign exchange market by the central bank to keep the Turkish lira weak against the US dollar. The very short-term nature of the high-interest government debt.
Don't you love American imperialism? Don't you love American imperialism? Ooh, even America is trying to sabotage Turkey. Guys, America literally sabotages anyone who barely challenges American globalist ambition. It's ridiculous, dude. It's ridiculous. This is why I'm pro-Russia. I'm just sick of it. And, in the France reaction, right? And, it's hilarious because French people were still freaking calling me crazy for being pro-Russia. But in my France reaction, where he said that it's because of American propaganda that people think that France is a weak country and that France has a bad military history. And why did American propaganda cause that? Because France didn't want America to invade Iraq. France was heavily against it. So because of this, America started portraying all of this propaganda as the French are weak, the French do nothing but surrender. And he showed the stats where public opinion of France before that propaganda happening in America was like way more favorable. But like afterward, in literally just a couple of years, it just dropped. Yeah. And people just had a bad image of France. Americans, I'm talking about. Those are the people I'm talking about, right? All because of American propaganda. All because France opposed America invading Iraq. All because France oppose American imperialism. Yeah. And it's hilarious because I was like, this is why I support Russia. I was like, this is why I support Russia. And people were calling me insane. People were like, French people, they were still calling me mad. I'm like, Jesus, have mercy. You are so brainwashed. Same thing with Turkey here. Same thing with Turkey. I hope Turkish people are smarter.
Bonds, together with the rising value of the currency, encouraged the Turkish private banks to borrow in foreign currency, and as they dished out loans onto the Turkish economy from their newly available foreign currency, corporations, households, and even the government stood to board a debt gravy train. In short, risky but high-profit behavior. With the liberalization and its ensuing effects, the bank's ability to get easy money abroad allowed the continual postponement of what was, however, an inevitable end to that debt gravy train. As the 90s came, investors started to question the ability of the lenders to repay the vast short-term loans, and the system went bust. Just before the crisis in 1994, Turkey had unsustainably high debt-fueled growth, a currency which had increased in value against the US dollar by 8.9%, an increased current account deficit which stood at 5% of its GDP, and it had little foreign exchange reserves to pay for the imports it was consuming. The budget deficit was climbing too. To top it all off, high inflation and high real interest rates and a weak banking system which was very much reliant on the global market due to their aforementioned questionable lending schemes. In mid-January 1994, Turkey's ratings were downgraded to non-investment junk grade, which started the capital outflow, which led to an even higher demand for foreign currency, causing the value of the Turkish lira to fall like never before. Finally, the government's insistence on lowering the interest rates to keep its own borrowing cheap gutted any remaining confidence and fully brought about an economic crisis in 1994. The Turkish Central Bank hastily intervened in the foreign exchange market and lost more than half of its foreign currency reserves to defend the currency and was left with a mere $3 billion to counter any future trouble. The Turkish Central Bank also hiked the overnight interest rates to 700%, and inflation rose to 103% compared to an already abysmal 60% in 1993. The consequences of that was a rush to the banks by Turks to convert their liras to dollars to escape the imminent collapse of the currency's value as lenders quit Turkey. The Prime Minister at the time was Tansu Çiller, the first woman to become Prime Minister of Turkey. But you won't find her praised or celebrated like other women who were elected to lead their countries as a first, because she is considered to be one of the worst Prime Ministers Turkey ever had. She came to represent some of the worst aspects of Turkish politics that had developed throughout the 1980s. Over the 1980s, Turkish politics had become increasingly corrupt, something that was frequently swept under and ignored while the economy was booming. But when the crisis came, it could no longer be hidden. The extensive privatizations of Turkish national assets had often been done in collaboration with the country's wealthy elites, meaning that as state companies were sold off, they were often not just put on sale to the general public, but handed over to wealthy Turks and the country's business elites through pre-arranged backroom deals. Policies and practices that continued under Çiller, who was blocked by the Supreme Court when she attempted to privatize the Turkish telecom. She also managed to collect a considerable personal fortune while in office through probably not exactly legal means. She also wasn't elected but became Prime Minister when her predecessor, who was from a different party, resigned office to become president, representing yet another aspect of Turkish politics at the time that many found frustrating: the enormous number of political parties. Several left-wing parties, several conservative parties with barely any differences between them, but for some weird reason this multitude still continued to exist,
what the hell? No difference between them? What?
Generating even more complex and insipid networks of varying political alliances and coalitions between parties and politicians.
Okay, but before he continues, okay, so he talked about the privatization of all of these companies, right? And it basically being dominated by these big rich corporations. Guys, look at America. This is why America is horrible to live in right now. This same exact thing has happened to America. This same exact thing has happened to America. Let me say that again. America is just dominated by nothing but just big, rich, elite people. Every single industry. Bro, tell me this. Why the hell is healthcare privatized? What? This is how you get insane stories that are true, like $5,000 for a ambulance ride. Oh, and you're pregnant in America and you need to give birth? $20,000 to $50,000. Yeah. And it's just awful. It's just awful. America has become so unlivable. The middle class is dead. Bruh, it's mad. No middle class is either you're just struggling or you are a part of the rich people who's basically causing everyone else to struggle. Yeah, that's the divide in America now. And people want to say, and this is why I say, like, cool, I like capitalism, but I don't completely like capitalism. Same thing with communism and socialism. You know, I think you need to have a mix of both to prevent, like, because there's something as too much of communism and something as too much of capitalism. But no, America propaganda works so strong that even Americans themselves will complain that I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Because their companies, the big tech CEOs, they're not giving me fair wages, man. They're just eating all the money up and forcing you to work all these hours. Oh, I'm being forced to work paycheck to paycheck, but capitalism, man. Capitalism is amazing, man. You like socialism? Socialism, big bad. Why? Because I was told that it was bad. I mean, really. It's because of the ignorance of the American population that America is so trash to live in. So good on you, Turkey. Good on you for stopping that whole privatization garbage from taking over Turkey, because it would have just been like America, where it's like 1% of the population freaking owning everything and everyone else is struggling. Literally 1% of the population in America owns 80% of the wealth. Bruh, that's insane. 1% of the freaking population of the entire United States, and it's all just privatization. Freaking hell, privatization is so garbage to me, honestly.
To that, during her time in office, the conflict with the Kurds escalated drastically. She approved of what became known as the castle strategy, which was in essence a dirty war, meaning counter-guerrilla warfare, something that could be summarized as terrorizing terrorists, meaning to isolate communities that may at some point have produced a terrorist and to terrorize them in the hope that they would as a result not produce more. This included the random shelling of Kurdish villages, arbitrary arrests, constant lockdowns and curfews, the cutting of basic infrastructure and supplies, but most controversially of all, she hired right-wing thugs and gangsters, including from the Grey Wolves, to carry out extrajudicial assassinations sanctioned not by the state, but by her office. It is in this chaos that Necmettin Erbakan's rallies started getting more and more traction. Railing against the corruption of the banks and the state, he set up his deputy, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to run for mayor of Istanbul, who was initially laughed at, but to the surprise of everyone, won. The political establishment had been blind to one of the most significant demographic changes in the country's recent history. In 1950, only 14% of farm laborers had owned no farmland. As the agricultural sector moved into becoming a sector dominated by large landowners, it dramatically changed the difference in income. By 1977, 58% of profits made in the agricultural sector went to 7% of the population. The fact that produce was mainly grown for large-scale export also meant that large stretches of land were often unattended to keep the prices stable. Combined with the automation of the farming industry, the redundant farm laborers had over decades moved into the cities in ever-increasing numbers, in ever-growing slums, with ever greater income inequality. In 1900, the population of Istanbul was at 1 million. By 1960, it was at 1.5 million. By 1985, it was at 6 million. And by 1995, the population of Istanbul had reached 10 million. Today, it lies at 15 million. In Ankara, the population rose from 30,000 in 1923 to 1.5 million in 1970 and to 2.5 million by 1989. In Izmir, the population rose from 200,000 in 1930 to 1 million by 1990, of which 60% were migrant laborers who lived in the slums called Gecekondu. These developments were happening throughout all major Turkish cities, where these new arrivals had almost always been ignored and left to themselves by a political establishment that saw them as backward Anatolians. And what they realized far too late in the 90s was that these people could also vote. The political east-west binary of the Republic was thereby broken. Furthermore, the trend of privatization fueled this social conflict. For most of the 20th century, Turkish media was under government control or pressure, or was ideologically aligned with the existing Kemalist establishment, which made anti-authoritarian currents harder to organize, especially after the 1980 coup and crackdown. Arabesque music, for example, was outright banned for a decade. Turks had to tune into Cypriot or Syrian radio to listen to arabesque music. Filmmakers, authors and musicians were either brought under state authority or exiled, such as Cem Karaca. The Turkish movie industry started by producing Turkified versions of foreign dramas or making cheap propaganda movies. This can be best seen in the swashbuckling adventures of Cüneyt Arkın, an actor whose movies included a hefty amount of anti-Greek or anti-communist messages, usually by a Rambo-like Arkın fighting his way through hordes of enemies and saving the damsel in distress from the Byzantine emperor. This all changed with the trend of privatization under Özal. In 1990, Turkey's first private television channel, Star TV, was launched. This changed Turkish society. Television was no longer a novelty. It became part of family life as people began to be bombarded by an influx of foreign news, movies, and music shows. The vast majority of the Turkish population was exposed to liberal foreign media for the first time. No longer was sexuality suppressed or people shown as monolithic enemies or friends. The Turkish youth of the 1990s, who voted mostly for opposition parties today, were raised with Western television and entertainment, but in time this led to authoritarian militarism collapsing. By 1995, the Islamic Welfare Party had won the mayoral elections in 6 major Turkish cities, and amongst them Recep Tayyip Erdogan began to make a name for himself as the mayor of Istanbul. A city that had for decades been neglected and plagued by corruption was made to shine. Sewage systems and water pipes were...
Really? Istanbul? You'd expect Istanbul to be more like focused on, but wow, that's
expanded
shocking.
Into the poverty-stricken parts of the city. Highways, bus lines, and increased funding for schools and sports. Erdogan built his political national recognition on the substantial changes and successes he achieved in Istanbul. From here on, he would start a career that would significantly change the country. The name Islamic Welfare Party was not chosen by mistake. Erdogan didn't just appeal to the voters through an appeal to religion as a cultural expression. Erdogan's political successes were built on a harsh condemnation of the modern republic. He decried capitalism and demanded a new social order based on Sharia that would respect the small farmer, the small trader, and would have a Sharia-based welfare system. Already during the 1980s, the Islamic Welfare Party had made a name for itself through soup kitchens for the poor. This model was the same as in every somewhat secular Islamic society challenged by Islamist groups, from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Erdogan became increasingly popular, and the remaining parties tried all they could to keep him out of any power, forming a weird set of coalitions of liberals, conservatives, the far right, the far left, in a secular alliance that was intent to keep them out at any means. But by 1996, Necmettin Erbakan's party had become so popular that they could no longer be kept out of power. Erbakan became the first Islamist prime minister of Turkey. However, they had greatly overestimated their power. Within a year of being in government, the Turkish army intervened and announced that if the government didn't resign, they would seize power. The great myth about this, the fourth coup in Turkish history, is that the coup itself never really took place. Merely the threat of a military coup was enough to scare the Islamists out of power. In their memories, the brutal cleansings of the last coup were still fresh, and they wished to avoid a similar bloodbath as the left had experienced amongst their own supporters. One of the defining images of this coup is a livid Erdogan climbing a podium during an Islamist rally after his mentor Erbakan had resigned, and citing a poem by the young Turk writer Ziya Gökalp.
Minareler süngü, kubbeler miğfer, camiler kışlamız, müminler asker. Allahu Ekber! Bir şey bizi sindiremez.
He was arrested and thrown in prison for a year, and it must have seemed to many within the political establishment that this Islamist mess was now over. But they couldn't have been further from the truth. During the late 90s and early 2000s, the political establishment managed to pass some significant policies, such as a normalization of relations between Turkey and Greece, which was, however, admittedly largely driven by artists and musicians in both countries. But most significantly, a refusal by Turkey to join the United States and Britain in their war against Iraq, a stance it took together with Germany and France in the hope of tying Turkey deeper into Europe. But the Islamist genie could not be forced back into the bottle, no matter what successes the political establishment could have delivered. For 7 decades, generations of Turkish politicians had pursued Ataturk's vision, and that vision mainly lay in the West, of a Turkey and its people standing unified and as equals amongst modern nation states. But that vision had started to crumble. It was built on a nationalist vision, a vision that erased all differences in culture, and a vision that tolerated no aberrations. It made the promise of a better future, yet that future seemed to always be just around the corner. Attempts to tie Turkey into Europe crashed onto the Cyprus question time and time again, and many Turks started to see themselves as being looked down upon by their European neighbors. That no matter where the country may go, most in the West would consider them to be nothing but backward Anatolian peasants. When Erdogan was released from prison, he rejoined the Islamist political struggle, who had simply rallied into a new party, the Virtue Party, who in 1999 won several seats, including for female members in the Turkish parliament, a parliament in which it was forbidden to wear headscarves.
Very interesting. But why? Oh, is it because like secularism, or I think so. I don't know. You could explain that to me in the comments. I mean, if it's forbidden, it's forbidden. You gotta follow the rules, bruh. You got to follow the rules, man.
Sayın Başkan, değerli milletvekilleri, Türkiye'de hanımların giyim kuşamına, başörtüsüne, özel yaşamlarında hiç kimse karışmıyor. Ancak burası hiç kimsenin özel yaşam mekanı değildir. Burası devletin en yüce kurumudur. Burada görev yapanlar devletin kurallarına, geleneklerine uymak zorundadırlar.
True. Again.
Burası devlete meydan okunacak yer değildir. Lütfen bu hanıma haddini bildiriniz.
That's insane. That, bruh. What the heck? Oh my gosh. All because of a headscarf. I understand the meaning behind it, but like that's just. But yeah, I do understand that perspective. Like, bruh, now is not the time, and now is not the place. Like, nah, bruh. It's completely understandable. Like, I get the message that she was trying to do, but really and truly, like, no. Like you said, it's a sacred place, a sacred institution. It's like, no. Like, no, bruh.
This, a famous moment in recent Turkish history, is a very uncomforting clip to watch. Even if you yourself might find overt religiosity and political religiosity rejectable and be an ardent defender of secularism, this moment and the way Mevle Kavakçı is treated simply comes across as misogynistic. And that was the point. When Erdogan...
I do agree that did come out very misogynistic. It did. Especially when he said, like, teach this woman her place. Okay, that was a bit extra. Okay, you could have just said, like, yo, you can't dress like that.
Came back into Turkish politics during the late 90s, what the Islamists had specialized in were these types of targeted and deliberate provocations. Not the kind that were reactionary, but the type that turned the understanding of the modern world on its head. The veil is forced upon women in many Islamic countries.
That's what it's called. The veil, that's the word I was trying to think about early in the video when I was talking about the black thing that covered the women.
To wear it is often brutally punished. In many ways and in many countries, it is a symbol of male dominance over women. And if you ever wondered how throughout the early 2000s it was rebranded and remarketed into a symbol of women's liberation, it started here. Women who wore the veil in Turkey could not attend university.
Really? Because whenever I see the veil, I think of male domination. Like, that's the first thing that comes in my head. Like,
enter a public building to either stand for office, vote, or even just to apply for or receive their benefits. One group of people who were particularly maligned by all this were young single mothers who happened to be religious, an opportunity which the Islamists seized by offering them charity and also promising them a better life under a less restrictive state. The late 90s saw riots in the streets of Turkish cities like had never occurred before, not by men, zealots or leftists, but by veiled women. The political establishment had branded itself and seen itself as the liberator of women who had freed them from the shackles of religion. And with this really smart move, the Islamists made them look like the oppressors of women. The Islamists shed the image of religious zealotry. They rebranded themselves as liberators, as open people, people who wanted to protect the vulnerable from a zealous secular state and its ruthless capitalism. They also questioned the founding myth of this state. Why do we fight the Kurds? Aren't the Kurds fellow Muslims? Why not make peace with the Armenians? In these days, the Islamists even spoke on behalf of equal rights for gays and lesbians. They took on every cause which they could use to undermine the image of progress and
no comment.
modernity that the secular political establishment had built. No longer seen as scary fanatics, even left-wing voters started rallying behind them, who saw in their message validation of theirs that had been so brutally crushed by the army. In panic, the political establishment attempted to form ever more absurd coalitions and alliances. Coalition governments of the center-left, far-left, conservatives and far-right nationalists were supposed to keep the Islamists out, but increasingly did nothing but expose their own internal conflicts. The Supreme Court banned the Virtue Party as being anti-secular and therefore unconstitutional, but they merely reorganized into a new party, Erdogan's Justice and Development Party. The political establishment mocked Erdogan for being an uneducated peasant, an Anatolian know-nothing from the slums, but they didn't realize that his humble background is exactly what made so many Turks identify with him. Every time they mocked him, they merely made him more popular in the public eye. And as the year 2000...
And that's the power of having humble origins, is that you can just relate to people more. And due to the fact you can relate to people more, you resonate with most people. And it's very easy to garner support like that.
The Development Party had a sweeping election victory, gaining a 2/3 majority in parliament. The country was about to undergo the most drastic changes that it had seen since Ataturk.
To be continued!
And here, at the end of part 2, there's something I feel obliged to do. You all have been waiting 3 months for this.
Okay, if you made it all the way here and you like my reactions, subscribe. If you know any other Turkey reactions that you would love to see, I do a lot on my channel. you are free to comment it in the comments below. Eventually I will do it. If you want your reactions to be done quicker, you can always check out my channel membership for only 99 cents a month. Your reactions are done much more quicker that you want. More priority reply to your comments. You get access to the private Discord server where you get better communication with me, more insider information on what's happening with my channel. This stuff is like more for my active viewers. So yeah, just telling you guys that. This video is a part of Members Week. Yes, Members Week is a week where channel members for 1 week have their video reactions done. Okay, this is the benefit of being a channel member, and I thank you to you guys for supporting me, because every dollar counts and I do appreciate it. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.